what is this not a prosecute? Because all we think when we hear not a prosecute, like I said, these people are bright. They have been given money. Yeah? And the issues we are now, which are major, is the forfeiture thing. Excellent. I mean, really, from what I understood yesterday, attending, excellent. But I think that's just only a half the story. What's the full story? When we forfeit all this to the government, who gets this thing? Because the next thing we'll be thinking the DPP now will have that house, he's bought house, and do you understand? Tell us, how does it all end? The first thing that we saw about the forfeiture in this country was, I think, the first case, 65 million, faith, and so on. The government actually says this money is going to go to the bursary to give students at the University of Zanzibar. Those are the things we want to hear. That's building trust. Um, Crisis communication, have a crisis communication in plan. Very key. Sorry, I'm struggling. My eyesight is not good. Uh, trying to read some of these things. Have trusted messengers. If I know they cannot be at your level of competence in terms of explaining, but there are some basic things that can be used. For example, the chiefs in rural areas. Tell them the basic. We have got 73 tribes. Translate this in languages so that they understand what's this forfeiture, what's this not a prosecute. There got to be a deliberate effort from yourselves, and not just waiting for the entire organization to be able to be effective communicators. Even you yourself, as individuals, as prosecutors, you need to take that baton and make sure that you do communicate. Most importantly, my suggestion would be transparency reports. Tell us how many cases you did in a year, how much, whatever, and all this, so that we know where it went and so on. It's that simple. It is things that you are doing today. We're not asking you to be able to do things that with outside your confines. But the point is that there gotta be a deliberate communication for you to build that trust. Now, just to expand on the communication aspect, the root of communication word, I said the mutandas, whatever it is, it actually comes from Latin. Latin. It's called communicare, and it's means share to make common. I'm having very difficult thing to read. Please forgive me. You know, my eyesight is not that good. But all in all, is that it is the exchange of thoughts, messages, or the we are exchanging messages from one sender to the receiver. I think that's the message I'm trying to put forth there. Like I mentioned, communication is a two-way process. There is the transmission side and the feedback side. And the goals of communication are simply to motivate, to inform, to persuade, and to request. Most importantly, and this presentation is about building trust and the relationship, because you need that support from the public. You're a public institution. What you do is in public, is in public. So we want to know. So it gotta be effective communication that you use to be able to say what is it, and we should be able to trust in you. Context of communication. Communication simply, if you look on the left-hand side of the triangle, the way it's supposed to be is a sender, message is there, a sender is sent, and you receive a bit of feedback, full stop. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is. If you look on the right-hand side triangle, it gives you more detail. You can see that the sender is actually a controller. He may spice up the information to get a bad feedback. He may spice up the information to be able to get what is not meant. And that's where you come in. Don't let others say your story. Say your story yourself, because the source matters. Because in the end, it is your responsibility to build this trust. And you need that trust for you to do what you do. Basically, steps in developing effective communication, very simple. You look what message is supposed to be. You determine the channel you're going to use. You do your message mix so that it appeals. It must be palatable. People must understand. It must be simple. We're not going to use legal terms or legal jargon. It's simple English. It's effective communication. Effective communication involves matching the communication channel you use. I mean, look at when God spoke to Moses. He spiced up the communication channel. There was a fire there and all those things. That's God. So who are you that you shouldn't spice up all these things? That's God himself. He needed to spice up. He's an effective communicator. The burning bush and so on introduces the same, I am who I am, and you call me this and all. But at the end of it all, God showed to Moses, and he has showed to us, all of us, that he means what he says and he walks the talk. I mean, that's the key message. When you communicate, you need to manage the communication. Communication needs to land on the eyes of in the ears of the people when it's needed. Like I say, don't communicate when it's stale. It's a sheer waste of time, because your objective is you want to build this trust from the general public. So communicate on time, be prompt. When the issue is hot, that's when we need communication. Because when the issue is hot, everything is down. Nobody communicates, and we only hear slayers telling us this and explaining very well, very good English, by the way, which they become expert, you know. They show that ability. Remember, 4 pillars of community. They show their ability, like they understand this thing, but you are the expert, but you are quiet. It is key that when we communicate, we manage how we communicate, because we know that we are talking to the public. There are public engagement. When you engage, you have to look at some of the issues the issues that is at hand. How you engage matters, the mode of engagement matters, what you use matters. There are a number of tools that you can use to engage the public. Today it's even made easier because of so many social platforms that are there. But the point is, let's make sure that we do recognize that effective communication is going to build our trust. And therefore, we use so many platforms that are available to engage the public. What is key in the rule of engagement is that you need to define the rules for the engagement that you're having. And please, when you communicate, don't over communicate to raise the over expectations from the public. You need to be within the confines of what is your ability as an institution or as individuals. I want to bring up this survey done by Audemans Barometer of Trust. And just to show you, this is done on an everyday or every year basis. Audemans has been producing this Barometer of Trust for the last 19 years. It is accessible. If you go on Google, you'll be able to access and get that. The interesting stuff is that they did a survey and asked, how much do you trust the government to do what is right? And unfortunately, people don't trust in government. I'm not talking about political, I'm talking about institutions of government. They don't. And the funny thing is that if you look at that survey, countries like the USA, the UK are in red. We would expect that these countries will shine and be, yeah, people trust because they do everything. So this just shows that there's a lot of work that you need to do in terms of effective communicating to the general public of who you are. It is amazing. Couldn't believe when I said, the UK, France, Kenya is actually doing very well. The Asian countries are better off than developed countries. Well, some are developed. This is produced on a yearly basis. Last year, it was at 50% total average. It has only gone by 1% this year. Now, if you look and change the tables and say, do people trust businesses to be able to deliver? They actually show you that they believe more in business than government to be able to do what they say they'll produce. Again, interesting, this is accessible. It is free of charge. You go on Google and search Alderman's Barometer of Trust. It has so many surveys that they do. But the point is, we need to do more to effectively communicate with the general public because we need their support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mtumushi, for that presentation. I will allow one or two, let me just say two comments or questions. Is there any question from the presentation that has been made? All right. It means that the presentation was very clear. Raise a hand. Oh, please proceed. Is there a mic, or you can move to a table where there's a mic quickly? Okay, move to the table where okay, there's a mic there. Proceed.
Good morning. I think I agree with you. I've done a research on this particular subject, um, and the findings actually, most people, even in countries like in the US, people, members of the public, don't know what the why certain decisions are made by um prosecutions departments. Okay, now I just have a question for you. Do we balance the need for confidentiality and the need to disclose prosecutorial decisions? Thank you.
I hope I got you well. Like I mentioned, there are some active cases which you cannot, of course, talk about. That's straightforward. I think there are cases that cannot be told in court. But the objective is to have building public trust. If you look at some of the strategies which I put forth there, was the fact that I mentioned you need to be producing something called a transparency report. Because when a case is disposed of, please correct me, I could be wrong, I can walk to the High Court registry and pay and get, it's public. So there's nothing there that we can, I'm sure I'm right what I'm saying, if my wife taught me well. So these are the things that we expect, for example, the NPA to be able to say, within this year, we did these cases and so on and so forth. You have to protect what the law says in terms of active cases. We are not asking you to be telling us now we are prosecuting this and so on and so forth. No. We're telling you to produce this report, which is an aftermath of cases that are disposed of, because then anybody can see exactly how it is. And what's important, again, like I mentioned, in building that trust, there is need for explanation of matters of the law or understanding the statutes themselves. Not the prosecute. It's a famous word in this country which we always hear. Tell us what situation takes us to go to Nello Prosecute, because my engineering mind tells me, Nello Prosecute, these guys, they didn't even have evidence for to take this, and now they have failed along the way. Explain to us the process. What situation entails that it ends up into a Nello Prosecute? So these are some of the things that we are trying to, I was presenting that, not just me but a larger citizen of this country would want to understand some of these processes and how you come up with some of these decisions. Remember, the 5 drivers of um, trust is decision making becomes key. Thank you.
I see no other hands. Thank you very much, Mr. Mutumushi. But before you go, I wish to announce one thing to everyone and yourself, that only the words I'll use are the words that the DPP would normally use. Watch this space. He's been very emphatic on us telling our own story. So even when you are presenting, I would remember him emphasizing to us in senior management on how we're supposed to use our platforms that we have to communicate to the people what we're doing and how we are doing these things. So I know, I prophesy next year, this period, we'll have a different story to tell. Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause. Points, allow me to welcome Mr. Ian K. Waluzimba to the podium as we look at the next session for today, that is innovation in the field of anti-corruption, new approaches to old problem. Thank you. Welcome him, encourage him.
Good morning. Habari. Sawubona. Maokabwanji. You people, you're not responding? Muzule Chan. Mulegachili. Bakaonde. Are you in the house? Mujiepi. Mwashubukeni. Do you have people from the Copper Belt? My people. Kopala. Mulishan. Distinguished guests, fellow participants, I stand before you as your moderator for this morning's session, Innovation in the Field of Anti-Corruption, New Approaches to an Old Problem. Indeed, this is an old problem. To unpack this topic, I have eminent speakers. The first speaker is Major Twalib Mubarak, retired, the Chief Executive Officer from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission of Kenya. The second speaker, who we interacted with yesterday, is Mr. Henry Matthews from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Highland. Last but not the least, we have Mrs. Priscilla Chansa, the Chapter President for Transparency International, Zambia. Ladies and gentlemen, may we welcome to the podium the eminent speakers. I have a privilege to go to the podium, our first speaker, Major Twalib Mubarak, retired, Before I do so, may I just go through his bio? Major Barak joined the Kenya Army in 1984 as a cadet and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1988. He served in the military for 15 years. He also served as a United Nations military observer in Western Sahara under United Nations Mission for Western Sahara. And he was awarded a United Nations peacekeeping medal. In 1999, Mr. Mubarak retired from the military, having attained the rank of major and joined the former National Security Intelligence Center service. He's credited with training and mentoring some of the top intelligence officers in Kenya. In 2006, Mr. Mubarak joined the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission as a principal officer intelligence and played a key role in creating the intelligence department. In 2010, he left the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission to join Kenya Electricity Generating Company. On 11 January 2019, Mr. Mubarak was appointed as the Secretary and CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission for a tenure of 6 years. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and Sociology and Masters in Armed Conflict and Peace Studies from the University of Nairobi. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to in welcoming Mr. Mubarak to the podium. Karibu.
Muri bwanji tuli bwino ndikukala kutopatopa kugona bwino bwino paribe kugona. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, let me observe the protocol set. I speak a little bit of Chewa because I did my army training in Malawi. That was 1984. And what I came to realize is that when I'm in Nairobi, people speak something similar to Malawi. When I ask which country do you come from, they say I'm a Zambian, I am Zimbabwean, and I realize all this is Bantu. So there's communication on that. The topic is about new innovation to fight the old problem. And my setup is a little bit different because I wanted to make more of the reality on the ground. I have served as the CEO of ESCC. I'm almost finishing my term. For your information, all the big newspaper in Kenya today, they have advert for my position. Unfortunately, they are not inviting foreigners. Otherwise, there would have been a job opportunity for you to be the CEO, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. We are established as a commission. We are established through a constitutional commission established under pursuant Article 79 of the Constitution. And our mandate is to fight corruption through enforcement, prevention, and public awareness. Also, we have a presence at the headquarters and we operate 10 regional offices in the country. Our staff capacity is 750. Although our establishment is 1,500, we've been having a problem of meeting our required number, and our annual budget is $32 million. May sound big, but this is still very little for our work. Now, I start this presentation with something that I picked in one of the books that I read about global corruption. And there's an element of agreement that around the world, corruption has become a primary mechanism in which power, politics play around. Actually, they say politics is the engine and corruption is the fuel. It's only how it is being done. Maybe in Africa, it is done in a crude way where you see potholes everywhere. You see health facilities that are dysfunctional. And in the developed world, you find everything is okay, but there are pertinent questions to be asked. We know the Americans are going for election. The big question that I actually attended an FBI cause on corruption, And the American senior officer who was opening the course asked us, where do we get billions in the campaign? Do political parties go to the bank and take loan? Those are the questions that you need to ask yourself. So you can see corruption is all over the world, but it manifests itself in different forms depending on the country. So we are talking of the capture of electoral process, the weak oversight and accountability mechanism, and weak enforcement laws, which results into impunity. When you are talking about that, is that they say, like in America, they have observed that when the Republicans are in power, big companies that are associated to Republicans are the ones that end up getting a lot of government contracts. But you as a prosecutor, you as an investigator, there will be nothing for you to pick and say there's an offense which has been committed. So they say 50% of the corruption that goes on in the world may not be able to face court of law. A good example, I am not supposed to employ my child or my daughter or my nephew or my niece in the state corporation that I'm heading. Let's say I'm the MD of Zambia National Oil Corporation or Kenya Electricity Company. I'm not supposed to bring my son or my daughter. But you know, Africans, we are very innovative. What I'll do, I'll tell you, bring your son and take my son. And people can tell these are games being played, but you are not able to take somebody to court. The same with political parties. You put good laws to say you are not allowed to spend more than, let's say, 100,000 US dollar if you are campaigning for a seat of member of parliament. But people know how to circumvent that. And when they come to power, they tell you, you know, I have to return back my money. Because like in Kenya, where we are heading to now, you cannot, most of the governors will tell you, you cannot campaign to become a governor in Kenya if you are not loaded with money. And what happens to this is that when you come to power, the best thing you can do now is, first of all, to recoup what you have spent. Now, that is where now corruption permeates in procurement. Then you say, after recouping what I have spent, I have to add more for the next campaign. And if the next campaign things don't work, I should have a plan B of self-made pension scheme. Still more, in case you've lost, there is some money for you to be to keep your standards, you know, driving a big car and whatever. So you can see the issue of funding fuels corruption, and the corruption comes back in a vicious cycle. So that one is one of the main problems that we have, and we have to look at you as lawyers to see how to streamline laws that will seal those gaps. Because you can put a very good automation. People will say modern techniques of fighting corruption, let's automate. If you automate and there's no integrity, you are doing nil work. And I keep on giving people an example of Mexico. Mexico, they put the best security system at their airport to curb drug trafficking. Then it was realized the Americans were still complaining that there's an element of inflow of drugs from Mexico. And they noted that that security system, there were disgruntled staff within the airport who said every 2 weeks we need 1 hour maintenance of the CCTV and everything. So when everything is switched off, that is the time the drugs find their way to the airport. So the integrity comes first. We can automate, we can do e-filing, the prosecutors, everything, filing of the system at the judiciary, but definitely there's somebody who will be operating. So that person, if has no integrity, you'll be having a problem. So let us look at the type of corruption that are washing us as countries. Let me talk about the grant corruption. You're talking of when political elites steal large sums of public funds. or abuse power for personal or political advantage. This is one type of corruption that is very common. We have administrative corruption. This is when middle level or junior level staff take corruption. The policeman, a clerk in survey office, a person issuing the ID card. It may sound small amount, but it have effects. It has effects on that. One lawyer told me, "Why are you chasing policemen? Because policemen are just they're collecting a small amount of money." I told him, you need to be analytical. Most of our roads in Africa are very unsafe because of the impunity perpetuated by corrupt police. A car that is not roadworthy, they will be bribed, they will allow it to go. It will come and hit you, 10 people down, gone. So it has ripple effects that we need to address some of this petty corruption. You go to register a child to join university, you are told, bring this and that and that. And if you're not able, the kid is deferred in his studies or her studies for 1 year just because maybe he could not pay the $30. So petty corruption has got ripple effects to the society. And then we have autocracy, a government controlled by officials who use political power to appropriate the wealth of their nation. This is quite common. And that is why you find some countries in Africa, the leaders, they may be older than you since you were born in terms of the time they've been to office. We have African leaders who have been over 40 years in power, and that one that one tells you about the issue of the state capture. When private entities corruptly influence decision making, the people who are not in the state, they are not they are not ministers, they are not permanent secretaries, they are not DPPs, they are not everything, but through the backyard, they're the ones who are controlling, uh, the state. So once you address these issues, this one helps a lot in addressing corruption in general in a country. Next. Now, there's always been this issue. We are not winning war against corruption because the anti-corruption bodies, they are weak. The DPP's office is weak. The judiciary is the main stumbling block. It's a blame game that is quite common in Africa. But for us to address corruption, we have to look at the three pillars that perpetuates corruption. The political culture of the country influence a lot whether the country is going to have corruption or not. We are talking of election campaign financing. I've just talked about campaigns in governance, campaigning, presidential campaign. When people now mobilize, when elections are approaching, people mobilize to get illicit funds to finance their campaigning. Vetting of candidates. People say anti-corruption agencies should vet MPs, should vet the president, should vet the senators in order to get clean people in the system. The best people to vet a candidate is not organization or entities, it is the public. Because if you follow the law, like in Kenya, the law says you cannot be barred from vying public office unless you've been convicted and all avenues, legal avenues, have been exploited. That is Court of Appeal, Supreme Court. So right now in Kenya, we have MPs who have been convicted, they're out on appeal. And can I tell you something very interesting? There are even members of parliamentary committee where I appear and they grill me and I know this is a convict who has appealed. But now the same MPs will tell you, we cannot legislate to say, once you have been convicted, you've been charged, you should not occupy an office, because we have seen other countries where this now becomes a weapon to bar people from participating in election. It has happened in Brazil. It has happened in other countries, Ukraine before. They say that a certain country in Africa has put a lifestyle audit, but the plan is to bar sympathizers of the previous regime to come into power. What am I saying? I'm saying that the best people to vet a candidate are the citizens themselves. Because if you have a poultry farm and you want to employ a nearby worker who has in another poultry farm, and you go and do a small due diligence, the guy tells you this man is a good worker, but he used to steal a lot of my animal feeds. Will you employ him? No. So the public must know that this man has got this kind of case. We should not allow him to contest. But once we allow that, now we are creating impunity. And the other problem that we have on the political culture is bureaucracy. They say what ails many states in Africa is corruption and bureaucracy, because things takes too long. In December, I went to Dubai, but first I went through Oman. At the border point of Oman and Dubai, I took less than 10 minutes to be cleared. But from Kenya, if I'm traveling to, I'm crossing the border to Tanzania, and we don't require visa, I will take, if I'm lucky, I'll take 1 hour, if I'm lucky. So bureaucracy is really causing corruption because people now have to bribe things to move very fast. We're talking of the social values, civic education to our citizens, community awareness, integrity champions, and it should be done in all places of work, institutions, the awareness, and then that one will bring about changes. Yesterday, we talked about Zambia sliding to Digit 2 in Transparency International. And before it was in our group of Kenya, 120 something, Piri, I envy your country. But why did you end up there? Simple leadership. And leadership is not presidency alone. You are talking of the presidency, you are talking of the senators, you are talking of the people in the institution, chief justice, the DPP, and the rest. So when there's a combination of that, you are able to fight corruption and keep it up. Uh, I I was thinking that Kenya, by the time I'm leaving, it will be in below 100, but from 144 we are in 126. So 18 is not a bad score for me, but still we are not in the best position. Then we talk of enforcement, and enforcement here we are talking of institutions. We are talking of the judiciary. We are talking of the anti-corruption bodies. We are talking of the police and the civil service. When you start politicizing the civil service, that is the beginning of corruption. Merit in the civil service will be very important, and you can see country like Italy and Israel, they have a lot of political problems and whatever, but they have sound civil service that it does not tamper with the running of the government, and corruption is under control. Efficiency of the administration of justice, that is funding and reinforcing the entities, that is the judiciary, the prosecutors, and the investigators. Next one. So what we are talking about also intelligence investigation, leveraging on technology, asset tracing and recovery, partnership. We saw yesterday Mr. Mura presented about partnership. We do very well now in asset recovery, thanks to the Basel Institute, UNODC, and other agencies, foreign agencies that have come in as synergy, and they have assisted us. Now we are on our own and we can move on, and we are one of the best examples in Eastern Central Africa. Automation of government services, that one must come with integrity of the people who operate. Now, another strategy is the issue of denying safe haven. With the globalization, if somebody is hiding money in Dubai, he should be able to be picked very fast, and building frameworks to facilitate cooperation on mutual legal assistance. There was a presenter who talked about the challenges of mutual legal assistance. You write when you get bundles and bundles of write-ups. They are in Italian, or they are in Chinese, or they are in Polish, or they are in Turkish. Now that becomes a little bit a problem, and we need to have new softwares that are able to be accepted within the court system to be able to translate all those papers. Then we are talking of building a value-driven society. And here I'm talking about up into the East Asia, Hong Kong. I went to Singapore for training. University students, they put their laptop at the stadium, they go and play basketball, they go and play baseball, they go and play football. After that, the young man leaves his bag with a laptop or iPad, goes and takes shower, go to the cafeteria to have tea, come to the field on the grass to pick his bag. Can we do that? In Kenya, in Zambia, can we do that? You leave your bag, you do this and that. And surprisingly, let me go spiritually. Surprisingly, almost 100% in sub-Saharan Africa adhere to Christianity or Islam. We start every business of ours with prayers. Ironically, when I do investigation in Kenya, some of the theft that takes place in government organization, when you read their minutes, they say the meeting started with a word of prayer. These are thieves planning to steal, but they pray first. So values, we need to look at our values. Let embrace what we believe in. Christ, Muhammad, board, whatever, talks of good values. Let's follow what we read and what we believe in. Next one. So we are talking of political goodwill. The war against corruption, and Mr. Piri can attest to this. You must have the support from the top. You must have the support from the top. Once the support from the top is there, you'll be able to sail through. I personally have very good support from my president, and he told me openly, said, "Don't listen to anybody. Do your work. If there's any problem, call me." And I work independently. We safeguard our independence and the safeguarding of independence of judiciary in handling cases. Of course, sometimes we have some issues with uh, the, the, the judiciary, the DPP, and ourselves. They see problems with us, we see problems with them. You don't go and shout in public. You sit down and harmonize your problem and see how to move forward. Because in the fight against corruption, you have more enemies outside than for you to start a war within your own house. So it's good that you have that coordination approach in the administration of justice. And in Kenya, we have what we call the National Council of Administrative of Justice, where the president is the chief justice, the president of the forum. Next. So all in all, I'm trying to push on three things. The war on corruption in sub-Saharan Africa will be won when we have polished and civilized politics. Second, and you're lucky in Zambia. Zambia, you people, you don't have problems. Your elections are peaceful. You settle everything peacefully. Some countries, there are problems. Then you are talking of the culture of the citizen. In some places, when you send a person who is well educated, he gets defeated by somebody who is literate. Reason because people sometimes glorify those fellows who they think they are part of the underclass of the society. Then we have the strengthening of the institutions and the laws. That is the most important thing because the war on corruption is mainly based on hard evidence and technicality. I can attest that quite a number of cases that we have lost in Kenya is not because the people did not commit the crime. It's because the lawyers were smart, looking at loopholes, and cases are disqualified or thrown out based on technicalities. But even the lawyer, if he's your friend, you go outside, he will tell you, you know, your guys presented the case, it was weak, it was this, and ask him, what do you think? He will just smile, he will not tell you. Lawyers are very smart. They don't want to commit themselves in right. So, but they tell you the case was not well packaged. So corruption cases need to be well packaged, to be watertight. A small leak throws away the entire case that you've spent a lot of money, you've spent a lot of time, a lot of energy. So it is this kind of forums that we can discuss these issues. And at last, thank you for listening to me. Maybe I know he will say questions. Can I ask? Can I entertain questions? Okay. If you have any question of yours, you can write, and then after the presentation, I'll be able to answer you. Ziko Mukwambiri.
Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. And I'm glad that we are meeting for the second time. We visited ESCC this year in June. Our next speaker is Henry Matthews. We did interact with him yesterday. I'll quickly ask him to come to the podium and make his presentation. Thank you. May we give a big round of applause?
Always a technical difficulty. Thank you very much. The subtitle of my presentation is going to be Everything is Impossible Until You Do It. My colleague yesterday mentioned that there were two very big climbers in the Transparency International rankings over the last decade. One was Ireland and one was the Seychelles. We jumped from a country that was corrupt and in its political makeup to one that is hit the top 10 rankings in 2023, and we lost a place. Sorry, I beg your pardon, in 2022, and we lost a place in 2023. We are now one of the least corrupt countries in the world. The Seychelles similarly made a huge jump. Their ranking was where Zambia is today, and they had the very good sense to employ one of Frank Cassidy's colleagues to help them in their struggle against corruption. And I hope that Zambia has a similar success story. Thank you. The example, however, I'm going to give is one from Hong Kong. Hong Kong was one of the most corrupt countries in the world at the time. It was what was euphemistically described as a place of R&R for American troops during the Vietnam War. It had a huge gambling industry, it had a prostitution industry, and that all brought corruption into the system. There's a wonderful quote I read about Hong Kong, that in a corrupt town, the corrupt cop is king. Well, in a corrupt country, the corrupt prosecutor is emperor, and that emperor has to lose his power. The ICAC, or the Independent Commission Against Corruption in Hong Kong, adopted a threefold strategy. And it's a strategy that they still continue to use today. It is very similar to the strategy adopted by your own commission. I think you have a four-pronged attack, but the difference is that enforcement is divided into investigation and prosecution. And what I am going to do is I'm going to describe some of the things Ireland did fitting into the Hong Kong strategy. The most important thing is the engagement of the people, or the participation of the people, as Article 13 in the UNCAC Convention describes it. Without it, all initiatives will fail. The second thing is that there must be engagement from the very top. Hong Kong is interesting in that it fought its corruption in colonial times. Corrupt cop was found to have hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong dollars in his bank account, and he slipped out quietly, as is usual in colonial times, taking his ill-gotten gains with him. That outraged the Hong Kong people, and they were very lucky in that a newly arrived governor agreed completely with them, and that was Mr. Murray MacLehose. And it was he who set up the ICAC, and that is a model used in many countries even today. I'm not going to go very deeply into the participation of society. Mr. Patrick, who spoke earlier on about the engagement of the public and building trust, said it far more eloquently than me. All I can say is that you have to find your own ways of communicating with the public. Perhaps a silly example, and it was one that I didn't think would work, and it comes from Ireland, is ploughing championships. Ploughing championships are huge in rural Ireland, not so much in the city. How you can make a sport from driving up and down a field in a tractor, I don't know, but it's very popular. What it does have is 170,000 people visiting it. And we were asked to send people out to that. I was cynical about it, but it worked. We got very, very good engagement. We got real views from real people, and we used those views to develop policies. Moving on to the next slide. And again, we have very limited amount of time, and I'm going to talk perhaps about innovation here. And it's the third one that perhaps is the innovative part. The building of public trust has produced a willingness of society's institutions to engage. And I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but in the UK it's called Gimlat. And we call it, with a little bit of sense of humor, an Irish jig. It's the Joint Intelligence Group. What these groups are is a private-public partnership to exchange intelligence and to develop policies on an informal basis so that we can combat corruption. Sorry, it's primarily for money laundering, but corruption is a kissing cousin of corruption. Next slide. I'm not going to deal too deeply with what the perfect laws are. I'm not going to deal too deeply into what the perfect institutions are. Each country must find its own way. In my time, I've acted as an assessor for the UN, the Council of Europe, the OECD, and other institutions. And my experience would be that I have seen countries with perfect legislation. I have seen countries with the perfect trappings. But what they are missing is two things: leadership and public engagement. And without those, everything else just doesn't fall into place. Next slide. I actually went and searched and said, what are the latest things coming in the field of anti-corruption field? Blockchain for use of securing documents, and data analytics. Certainly in the public sector, we don't use blockchain. We don't have to, because our systems will show the fingerprints, or how should we put it, the digital fingerprints if our documents are tampered with. We use very, very simple technology. Data analytics, I have seen it. I have seen the proofs of it in fraud cases, not so much in corruption cases. Our social welfare department uses that. But I want to move away from corruption, or I want to move away from technology and corruption. When we had a problem in our office, we caught him the old-fashioned way, and we caught him as a result of engagement of the people in the office. And we did use technology. We were able to trace back our systems and build the case, but he was caught through people power, not through any involvement of technology. So what I am saying is technology is not the answer. It is not the full answer. What is important is that your own office is to the forefront of the fight against corruption. And it was very interesting that Mr. Patrick, when he spoke, stressed not only building trust amongst the public, also within your office. With the people behind you, with your office engaged, you can do anything. Next slide. On a comparative basis, I have prosecuted very, very few cases, very, very few corruption cases, small number. And there is a reason for that. To prove the corrupt bargain, there are a limited amount of ways you can do it. You can have an immunity witness, somebody inside the deal who will explain it to you. You can use electronic surveillance. You can have a whistleblower within an organization who knows the organization. But it is really a very, very difficult thing to detect. So you have to find other means. If you read the UN Convention, It also talks about the alternative offenses that you might consider. We've used everything. If I were to say what has been the most effective, certainly in the field of corporate corruption, it has been false accounting. You cannot pay a bribe without disguising it in some way. And if you have a good forensic accountant, the hole will be found and you will build your case around that. Money laundering is also a very good alternative. If you have unexplained money in the bank account, that can form the basis of our case in Irish law. We also have one great advantage. We do not have to prove a specific predicate offence. All we have to prove is that an offence was committed. Moving on. I'm not going to deal or delve too deeply into what the experts are. I've touched upon clearly you need specialist investigators, and it is your job to go out and to explain what the requirements of prosecuting a corruption case, a money laundering case, or a false accounting case is. I'm not going to explain the significance. I'm not going to explain what the advantages of an FIU, but it is very important that they're connected up with the system. I've added regulators to it because you can use a regulator's expertise. If we go back to the previous slide, but don't, the regulators have an expertise in what the regulations are. And for public trust to be maintained, it's not always a corruption case that has to do it. I remember prosecuting a case in which a mayor of a town stayed on while a meeting about the planning permission for his hotel was being discussed. I had no evidence of money changing hands. I had no communication between the various parties. All I have is that he was simply there. And what we prosecuted him for was breaching that regulation. It may not sound much, there was no great penalty on it, but it certainly gave the public the impression and the reality that we were actually serious about prosecuting things in every way we could. Moving on to the next one. I've talked a lot about prosecution, but one of the most effective means we've used in Ireland to prevent corruption is having a tribunal of inquiry on the civil standard. And there's a politician who claimed that the commission had no right to inquire as to how he got his sums of money. He was forced to answer, and he explained that he won at betting. And in the pubs around the area where he comes, people sneer at him, any tip for the 230 in Chepstow. A public commission can humiliate and is an alternative to prosecution. Also, an effective method of the fitness and probity regimes of most likely either the professional bodies or the central bank. These are alternatives to prosecution. Again, they apply to the civil standard. Again, they ensure that whatever happens, the person involved will never work in that industry again. And finally, the use of the civil forfeiture regime. That is a very, very important tool because it deprives the corrupt of their ill-gotten gains. And interestingly enough, I think it has been used also against corporates where we've taken the profits from them. And finally, so I suppose to sum up what I've said is, use what you've got. We started out with no technology. We had no proper case management system. Some of our IT people got together and put together a bodged up job, but it did the job. Eventually we got the money and we started to develop our own system. And if I were to say one thing, prosecution is not everything, but the prosecutors are definitely part of the solution. And I hope I've ended it with the beginning, not the end. I wish you all the best in your struggle against corruption. Thank you very much.
May we give him another round of applause? Now, may I invite to the podium our next speaker, Mrs. Priscilla Chansa. She is an advocate of the High Court for Zambia. She is a holder of a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of Zambia and a Master of Laws degree in International Business and Commercial Law from the University of Manchester. She has over 22 years of post-admission legal experience. She's a chapter president and board chairperson of Transparency International Zambia. May we welcome Mrs. Chansa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm assuming all the protocols were observed yesterday, so I won't go into that. I think from our end, we want to look at how technology can enhance the fight against corruption. We all acknowledge the fact that in the fight against corruption, we must have strategies that are holistic. I think previously it was more segmented, but now we realize that this is not work that can only be left to the states, but also the public must be fully engaged. So, from that perspective, we'll be talking about our experience as TI in the fight against corruption in utilizing technology. So one of the issues that we've actually recognized is that technology can actually reduce corruption risks. Secondly, it can enhance transparency and monitoring. Third, it can identify and investigate cases of corruption. It actually helps you to do that. Technology also helps us report corruption cases and protecting whistleblowers. So digital platforms are useful tools for creating public awareness of the types and levels of corruption and identify corruption hotspots. So, when we're talking about reducing corruption risks, we're trying to ensure that we minimize the opportunities that are created in rent seeking. For an example, I'll give you an example of a Transparency Watch that is in North Macedonia. They've actually developed a platform using crowdsourcing technology. This allows members of the public to report cases of corruption from their mobile phones and view other reported cases of corruption, creating trends from data and raising awareness of future corruption risks. So it enables them to actually report, but they can also follow up these corruption cases. So they'll be able to see what is being done on the cases that was reported. So when you move on to things like neural networks allows programs to recognize patterns and solve common problems in artificial intelligence. I think we're all aware that that is where the world is moving in terms of technology. One of these one of these technologies can also be used to predict public corruption in particular. Blockchain has been used in land governance initiatives as the technology can store land registry entries and land titles on the blockchain to protect them against fraud and corruption. This is one example that has been used in Honduras. There's a software, a tool that has been used called Phantom. Phantom has partners with the government of Honduras to establish a registry database on the blockchain to empower citizens to contest land titles in court. So you'll be able to see what is actually happening on the land title. Probably you occupied that land, there was no hearing that was held, then this land is given to someone else. So it gives you an opportunity, transparency and motoring when you're using technology. I think one of the success stories has been uh, TI Brazil. TI Brazil developed an interactive index of transparency and public governance, which enhances the performance of controller officers and legislatures in each of Brazil's 27 states. As a result of the comparative index, TIZ recorded concrete reforms and improvements made by 13 governments in direct response to the recommendation. So, this is usually when you're developing technology in the fight against corruption, you must be cognizant of the issues on the ground. One of the challenges that has always come out is you want to improve whistleblower channels. You want to ensure there's also whistleblower protection mechanism because there's always retaliation in these issues. You also want to ensure that the data, the quality of data that the state is giving to the public is helpful for the public to hold them to account. So what happened in Brazil was that the chapter actually noticed that the government started disclosing more audit portal, which provides summaries of audit findings and irregularities. So you are actually able to see even the recommendations that were made by the Auditor General and what action is being done. So you can use that to actually hold the different sectors of government to account. We move on to places like Palestine, where they developed a monitor platform to strengthen access to information on public budget, local governments, corruption related cases, and investigations. When you talk about TI Mania, they developed a platform that was an oversight tool that interactively, anonymously records and maps public education issues, including corruption. So you're able to see what is actually trending in that field. You can add your voice. You don't need to be recognized as a person. So even as a person who works in these public institutions, especially when you know there's something that is being done, some wrongdoing, it gives you the comfort to do that. So when you also can look at things like the Stolen Asset and Recovery Initiative, uh, which which is a public database that tracks efforts by prosecution authorities like yourselves to go after assets that stem from corruption. You also have tools like the Open Ownership, which collects data on beneficial ownership disclosures and supports government to make high quality data shareable. I think one of the issues that you will realize that in terms of benefit transparency, in terms of beneficial ownership, you find that there are certain companies or individuals who are shareholders and directors in particular jurisdictions, they've been mentioned in suspicious transactions reports. When they come to another jurisdiction, they might want to participate. So when you're able to utilize these tools, you'll be able to easily link these individuals from different jurisdictions, and it helps you to monitor what they're doing. When you come to Armenia, Armenia has got an electronic platform for declarations of assets, incomes, expenditures, and interest. It contains modules designed to capture and manage data on assets, income, expenditure, and interest of politicians and civil servants. It relies on AI and the machine learning to streamline data collection for users to search. So these are facilities that you can use. Of course, e-procurement improves the transparency of government operations and can facilitate the tracking of potentially corrupt activities, as well as increasing the accessibility of procurement processes. An example is Prozera in Ukraine, which is an open database allowing users to search by buyer, bidder, procurement entity, and procurement type. You also have an online database called K-Monitor, which the media, where you actually this is a platform where you can see media articles, that are dealing with corruption, public procurement, spending, and transparency. Then we also have Open Spending, which is a platform to search, visualize, and analyze fiscal data in the public sphere, and it involves 85 countries. So it's quite a wide range of tools that you can use in actually identifying or trying to see who's involved in corruption specifically. So when you move to identifying and investigating corruption cases, Crowdsourcing platforms are also important as they invite citizens to report instances of corruption. For example, in India, there is I Paid a Bribe, which allows the public to record when they were forced to pay a bribe and where. So it's easy for investigations officers to actually follow through because you have that information. In Indonesia, we've got Coropedia, which is an online encyclopedia which contains a database of corruption related cases in Indonesia. The portal actually includes track records of Supreme Court judges and information about corruption cases involving court officials. When you move to Brazil again, there's an artificial intelligence system which looks for suspicious use of public money by congressmen, using publicly available data on websites. So this team actually uses access to information laws to be able to access that information. They are able to ascertain if you're in public office, how much money was given to your entity, how much money has been utilized for that, how much money are you also utilizing on your own in your official capacity. Is there a difference, before when you became a congressman and after? Has there been money that has not been accounted for? So it gets to help you utilize those kind of things. So in terms of reporting corruption and cases, I think multiple TI chapters globally, they operate what we call advocacy and legal advice centers. And we've basically adopted Global Links online reporting platforms. The platform is fully encrypted and facilitates safe communication between the ALAC and whistleblowers or citizens who seek to report corruption cases, including anonymously. So, of course, one of the issues has been is this um, technology, you know, doesn't it have its own shortfalls? Of course, there are limitations. One of the issues that you realize is that, yes, while the new technology show potential for new anti-corruption interventions, there are still limitations in its application. The existence and availability of these new tools do not necessarily guarantee a desirable anti-corruption impact. Furthermore, this same software, these same tools can actually be used to perpetuate corruption. You talk about the dark web, the utilization of cryptocurrencies. But also, there's a challenge with bottom up initiatives may struggle because they depend so much on information that is accessible freely. And there's a limitation to what kind of information you can source freely. So I think those are some of the issues that you'll find in terms of technology. In concluding, I think what we want to say is for technologies to be useful in countering and preventing corruption, there's need to have a wider functioning accountability framework to support them, including an independent judicial system where you all fall part in providing access to justice, press freedom, and an active civil society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chancellor, for that wonderful, insightful presentation. Distinguished guests, fellow participants, at this stage, wish to invite questions. We'll take 3 questions. If there will be need, we may extend. As you interact with the speakers, please kindly indicate your name, your position, and where you're coming from. Any takers? The, we have the Prosecutor General. Then that gentleman at back there. Anyone else? And at the far end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. When the presenters were presenting their topics, I was tentatively listening and see what are the proper ways to fight corruption worldwide, and what are the pertinent problems which actually undermine our effective of dealing with corruption. What actually came into my mind is that if you look at globally and what is going on, it's mostly business people, our political leaders, especially those who have positions and have the power to manipulate things. Now, what came into my mind, I recall there is um, a convention dealing with immunity of individuals, diplomatic immunity or whatever. Now, when you look at that convention, you see that there are categories of individuals, leaders, especially political leaders, and then diplomatic people, who, when they are traveling, their bags, actually their positions, the handbags, are not searched. They are allowed to go freely. They can sometimes go into private airplanes and go to their destinations and come back. Now, you hear a leader from a poor country, like in Africa. I can say poor, although minerals are there, the wealth is there, but it's not consumed by the local people. A person goes with a private jet. He might carry diamonds, he might carry whatever, and come back with the same plane. And you hardly see what is there. It might be the proceeds of sale of diamonds or valuable minerals. Now, when he comes back, he comes at the airport, it's a private entrance, and he goes home. You don't expect this money to be put into the financial system. He goes to the farm. Most of them have farms. He goes to the farms, might have saved there. He put it there. And occasionally he takes this money to go and buy cattle, goats, etc. It's only after you buy this, it's then your cattle is registered in the agricultural system, and you legitimately go and sell them for the money to go into the financial system clearly, because you are washing your dirty money, money laundering. It's there. Is there a way to change the way the system works if we are serious in fighting corruption through the UN for these conventions to be amended? It's a 1961 convention, which is still operational. If we are serious to fight corruption, that is my biggest problem I have seen, which actually undermines our efforts in ensuring that corruption is eradicated. Yes, we can deal with these small ones, but to me, that is the biggest, because that is the way people go there. They can open accounts. Africans can go and open their accounts in America, Europe, and then they store their monies there while people were suffering back home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take another question before the responses are provided. There's a gentleman there, then there was another hand. I can't see very far. Okay. Please kindly indicate your name, your position, and where you are coming from. We are running out of time.
Good morning, Mr. Balaki. My full name's Sole Charles. I am a prosecutor from Kitwe. And the question goes to Mr. Twalibu Mubalak from Kenya. Mr. Mbalaki, of late, Kenya has been actually on record because of high corruption. From my little discovery, I have actually learned that the judiciary is being intimidated. You and me, Mr. Mbaraki, knows that by yesterday, Judge Mugabe, his security was actually withdrawn after delivering judgment for the IG because of the judgment which went in favor of the IG. Now, Mr. Twalibu, you are coming from the Anti-Corruption Commission. The question is, what are you doing as a commission in Kenya to actually curb what is actually going on there? And do you have enough support from the executive? Because nothing much has been done to protect the judiciary. Just from what I've said, say the security of one judge has been withdrawn. So you are here, Mr. Mubarak, to actually impact some information.
Sorry, I think your question has been made very clear. I think it's understood. We are running out of time.
Thank you.
My apologies. May we have the last question from this wing? Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Duncan Inkata, ICT and Digitization Advisor with GIZ. And my question is in relation to technology. I know we've talked a lot about the different digital tools that are being used in other countries in the fight against corruption, such as case management systems and the like. But my question is, how best can we address the aspect of these tools being effectively being utilized in different organizations? Because quite okay, the systems might be there, they might exist. We can have all these, different digital tools at our disposal. But how best can we make sure that the institutions that are, in the forefront of fighting corruption are utilizing these digital tools, and information is being shared with the public?
Thank you very much. The first two questions, I'll ask Mr. Mubarak to take them. Then the last question, I'll ask Mr. Matthews as well as Mrs. Chancer to speak to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are good combination of questions. One based on what we are doing, one based on activism and the reality on the ground, and sensational reporting. Uh, the question that the issue that was raised by the Prosecutor General, Madam Olivia, is a very critical question, and I'm happy that you've raised that question, because this is where sometimes we don't agree with our colleagues from the West. The West is their business is highly technological. Their way of life is too mechanical. Their system of transaction is too electronic. Now, maybe with the coming of AI, things will even get to another stage. We have had cases in Kenya where we have intelligence that a senior government officer was bribed, had cash. And this is where the disconnect is between the developed countries and the developing countries. In the developing countries, up to this age, the transaction is highly based on cash. And it brings a very big challenge when you automate and thinking that you will see the transaction based on electronic transfers. Everything is done in cash, and you are not able, you may get evidence that this person, a box, he went to a golf club, he parked his Mercedes, a guy came and put a carton in his boot, then he came out after a drink and he left. You record everything. You get the CCTV clip, but when you get a smart advocate, he will just ask you a simple question. Can you prove that that carton had money inside? This guy had gone, his colleagues were from the rural area, and he gave him a carton of mangoes, and you are done. And even when you are doing the investigation, when you come with the crime readers, the lawyers, to see how that one is admissible before you take to the DPP, the lawyers tell you, we know this was money, but you'll be asked this question and this case will collapse. What do you do? So we have to, apart from the support we are getting from our brothers and sisters from the developed world, we must develop mechanism of how to address this kind of issues. If you look at the Independent Commission of Anti-Corruption of Hong Kong, they told us the judges, the investigators, the prosecutors in the criminal justice system undergo sometimes ad hoc polygraphic test. Try to bring it to Zambia or to bring it to Namibia or Kenya. Guys will go to court, say this is human rights, and it will be thrown away. But polygraphic test is a very big deterrence for people in the judicial system, in the prosecution and investigative agency to be compromised. So some of these things will require new legislation. Unfortunately, yesterday I was joking to one of my Kenya counterparts that is when you go to parliament and tell them, can you strengthen the laws on conflict of interest? We have a case in Kenya. And the Senate has decided to dismantle everything. It is after the public uproar that the members of parliament refused to adopt the recommendation of the senators. It's like you are going to the dentist. You have only 10 teeth, and you ask the dentist, "Can you add more artificial teeth?" It tells you, "No, even these 10 should go." You will even regret why you went to the dentist. So sometimes we even get scared that when we go to the parliament to enforce on certain laws, to take care of what Madam has said, people try to dilute that. So, and that's why I talked about the political goodwill. The political goodwill, and it's not about presidency. It's about the Senate, the Parliament, and also the public themselves. So that is quite a big challenge. You remember one famous African leader was found with hard cash in his mattress, and he gave a very interesting excuse. I don't want to mention names because of diplomatic reasons, and the reasons given were not convincing. But that is how people make escape. We had a case in Kenya where we We managed to take 3 people in court. One we could not because he was given the money in cash. And unfortunately, where he was, there was also no CCTV. So this is something that, and that is why you find like in Kenya now, people are fighting e-procurement, electronic procurement. Even if the government is buying a baton, any citizen should be able to get it in the website. The other thing, payment. Payment should be done now on cash or electronic transfer, either mobile or banks, and we reduce the cash transfer. But people will tell you, like in Kenya, there's the company that deals with the meat industry, the Kenya Meat Commission. They'll tell you for us to go to the rural areas to go and buy cows and goats, to convince a local pastoralist that can you put your 20 cows in the truck and I'm writing you a check. He will tell you, no, why do you take 20 cows and you're giving me a paper? He wants to see real money. So these are the challenges that we need to work out as a group, as a bloc in East and Central Africa, including Southern Africa. May I jump to the second question? My brother, you've talked about the intimidation and judiciary. First of all, that issue is in the media. Of course, what happened is that the judge jailed, sentenced the Inspector General of Police of contempt of court, not to failing to appear in court. And as at yesterday, it is said that the police, because the police, even us as ESCC, we are being guarded by the police. Our premises are guarded by the police. The VIP protection I get is from the police. The judiciary, the entire judiciary get the protection from the police. To me, first of all, most likely that does not fall under my mandate. Secondly, ESCC does not react to sensational reporting. That when you see something on X, when you see something on what, you just jump and go and arrest people. The judiciary and the police now, they're in communication, and the government. So it's too early. It's too early for us to go, because for us, for now, the matter is more likely it is not that the judges are being intimidated. All judges and magistrate and the chief justice, they have police protection. This is a single incident, and if you read, I don't have the facts. If you read, there was a claim. It is said there was a claim by the judge that those policemen were spying on him, and the police got annoyed that if you don't trust us, that you think we have sent you spies, let us remove them so that you remain without spies. So you can see it's quasi politics and a grudge between the judiciary and the police, of which us as ESCC, as at now, we have no interest on it. Thank you.
In relation to the first question, I would agree completely. I think, for example, I went to New Zealand earlier this year, and I didn't exchange. I used electronic transfers everywhere. I've never seen a New Zealand banknote. And this does make it much easier. So when, for example, we're making a case and we do seize cash, our biggest cash seizure was 3.7 million. It is immediately arouses suspicion. It, why isn't this in a bank account? Why isn't it declared for a tax? So I think the developing world has to develop their own solutions to it. Now, I do remember when Ireland was a cash-based society, and one of the steps that we took was to give a tax amnesty to our taxpayers, and they thought it would yield hundreds of thousands. It yielded over a period of a decade over €1 billion at a time when our economy was very much smaller. We use that as a tool. So we're an open, transparent society. So yeah, our job is much easier. And that is the challenge for the developing world, to develop their own structures. And they will have to do it as a group. They can take help from the developed world, but it needs to be the global south need to work out their own solutions in their own way, hopefully with some help from us. But And again, as I ended my presentation, I wish you all the best with it. Moving to the second question, and it's just I'll talk to it briefly. My colleague Frank Cassidy explained that when they were setting up the UpCab, that they wanted a man, they wanted a single man because of the threat to possible threats to life. We had a very, very serious gangland problems. Our judges also had armed protection. Our society has moved on. The armed protection and the judges have gone. So again, it's the developed world can only add so much to the debate. You have problems that perhaps we once have, and maybe it may inspire to say that change is possible and that, you know, it will not always be this way. The world is a changing place. There is greater collaboration with it. I have at the moment, for example, a project going with I won't mention the name of the country, but it's to do with taking the assets in that country and giving them to the victims of people trafficking where the offense was prosecuted in Ireland. So we are building partnerships to help each other and to help enforce our laws. Hope that answered some of the questions. But as I say, I don't want to say you're on your own because you're not, but there's a limited amount the developed world can do, I think.
Thank you so much. I think in relation to the question on technology, technology must be fit for purpose. What do you want it to achieve? I'll give you an example. In this country, we've got what we call taxpayer identification numbers. That's your TP number. So for you to open a bank account, and it's actually linked to your national registration, we can actually utilize that to be able to assess someone's net worth, even when we are suspecting that you could have money that you can't properly explain. Because we must be able to look at your tax records. How much tax have you paid vis-a-vis what you own? When did you make this money? Because if I own, whether it's real estate, I should have my name will show up at the Ministry of Lands, and my national registration card number will show up. So you must be in a position to utilize some of these things to actually get to where you want to go. And a lot of people sometimes get to have this impression that technology will do everything for you. No, no, no. You must customize it. You must ensure that what you're putting in and what you are getting are the desirable results. I think there was one interesting comment on the issue about money from Africa going to the developed world. I think now there's a push in the anti corruption movement that we want to see enough of the governments in those jurisdictions pushing back, especially where we want to claim the money back. We need to see a lot more in terms of mutual assistance. And we want it to be something that is more global, something that countries, especially the developed world, must be willing to participate in. Yeah, I think for me, those are my two comments.
Thank you very much to the wonderful speakers. Leonard DPP, coming from the great city of Livingston, I would feel in my duties not to advertise it to our distinguished guests that they should interact with the mighty Mosotunya Falls, especially those who are visiting us for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, may we give a big round of applause to our speakers.